Hello, we are here at MiniStory with our Amie Kaufman, and I am Maria. I am very excited, in case you didn't notice. And how are you feeling?
Oh, this is wonderful. I think one of the hardest things about the last few years has been not being able to travel anywhere. And so every time I get to talk to readers in other countries, it just feels a little bit like I've gone somewhere else.
Yes, that is true. And that's how it also feels when we escape in stories, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were just talking about this before the live stream started, that when you're having a tough time, going inside a book is usually the best place to hide.
Indeed. Now, I wanted to ask you a few things. Not just about the book, but about yourself as well. But now we're going to start with your amazing book, The Ice Wolves, and I believe it's a trilogy, right?
Yes, it is. It is 3 books.
That is wonderful. So what inspired you to create this book?
I mean, it was a lot of different things coming together. It was, I had an editor who I really loved working with, and one day she came to me and asked if I would like to write a fantasy series for her. And we started talking about all of the things that we loved. And I've always loved stories about shapeshifters and about, if I could choose a superpower, I think it would maybe be to be able to turn into something else. Yeah. And, I loved wolves, I loved dragons, but I also wanted to write a story about not feeling very confident because, Anders, who's in Ice Wolves, he's never sure what the right thing is to do. He never feels particularly brave. He just does things anyway. And, I wanted to write about that.
Yeah, that's a really, really good idea. But I was really curious from the moment I started reading it and everything, what is the connection between the Ice Wolves and the Scorched Dragons?
I love that you have them. So in the world where the book is set, in each country, there are a couple of different types of magical creatures. And, both the Ice Wolves and the Scorched Dragons look like humans a lot of the time, but when they turn 12, they gain the ability to turn into an ice wolf or a scorched dragon. And although when the story starts, they're enemies, the truth is that they actually need each other. And in history, they used to work together. That, the ice wolves would design the magical inventions and the scorched dragons would create them. And yeah, it turns out they do a lot better together than they do by themselves.
Yes, that was a really, really interesting chapter. Actually, the entire story is like a little secret and we have to find out what's going on.
Yeah, I think sometimes when you're writing, you worry that readers will think, I don't know what's going on and I'm confused and I don't like it. But I always think that readers are pretty smart and they don't mind waiting and they like to figure things out. So they, when I'm reading, I like it when you just tell me a little bit, make me wait, tell me a little bit more and let me guess and let me imagine. So
I love doing as well when I'm writing. I make the beginning kind of hard to understand, and then basically the entire book you have to find out what happened at the beginning, what happened outside the pages you wrote. What is the actual story behind the story?
Yeah, exactly. Because I think we all know there's 2 different types of not knowing what's going on. One type is, I don't know what's going on and I don't like it. And I think I'm meant to know what's going on, but I don't. And, it's like coming in halfway through a TV show, but in a bad way. And then the other type is when you know that the author knows what they're doing and you think, well, I don't know what's going on, but I'm coming for the ride. I love it. And, you want the second type.
Mm-hmm. Your book is absolutely wonderful. And it's exactly this little secret. You have to find out what's going on. And the creatures you chose, they're absolutely stunning. And the way you write, I just love it. I love everything about it.
Oh, thank you so much. I had so much fun learning about the creatures. I mean, obviously you can't meet a dragon, although, you know, I spent a lot of time imagining it. But I did get to go and meet wolves when I was researching for the book.
Really? Because
I went.
Because a little wolf told me that you actually studied how wolves communicate, but he's a naughty fella, so I didn't really believe him.
No, it's true. I went to a wolf sanctuary in the United States where they're protecting some endangered types of wolves. And I like it because the wolves are not in the zoo at this sanctuary, the people are. So the wolves have these giant pens, huge, and you just have a very little space where you can stand. And if the wolf wants to come near you, it will, but it can also just leave whenever it wants. So it's still wild.
That is absolutely wonderful. And
yeah,
me, who is a person that loves wolves and this type of creatures, hearing this and meeting a person who actually studied them is wonderful.
I learned so much when I was there. And yeah, one of the guys who works at the sanctuary taught me how to howl so that the wolves would answer. I mean, they only answered me maybe half the time, but they answered him every single time.
That is absolutely amazing.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Now
very loud.
If you saw yourself as one of the characters in the book, who do you think you're most alike?
Oh, that's a really good question. Because I think, you know, you put a little bit of yourself into so many of the different characters. You know, at school, I was always in the library and always studying. And so that was a little bit of Elizabeth, you know, and I would actually say in a lot of ways, I'm more like Raina than I am like Anders, because, you know, if we're all lost, I'll be the one being like, I know where to go. It's this way. And like, I'm often not correct, but I'm always confident. And I remember one day when I was working on this book, you know, I was trying to think about how Anders would see things, you know, the boy who's not confident and he's used to his sister making all the decisions for him. And he's a follower, not a leader. And I was talking to one of my friends and I said, I don't think I'm writing the book very well. I don't think it's working. Everything I try feels wrong. I just, you know, I don't have any confidence in myself right now. And she looked at me and she went, so would you say you feel a bit like Anders? And I was like, I do. And for the rest of the book, it was fine, because whenever I thought, what would Anders do? I would just think, what if you can't write this book? What if it goes terribly wrong? And then as soon as I was worried, I would know what Anders would do, because poor Anders is worried a lot.
Yes, but Anders, what I really love about Anders is that he listens to his heart. He always has like this invisible wall and he doesn't know how to cross it, but in the end, he just literally creates another one out of ice and fire. Yeah,
well, and I think, you know, although I talk about him being, you know, scared of things and not confident, you know, he learns that actually he could do a pretty great job. And, you know, I don't want to spoil the trilogy, but as it keeps going, you know, he learns that actually without him, you know, everyone's in a lot of trouble.
Now I'm really, really curious. What will the elementals in the future books be?
I don't know. I mentioned a few of them in Ice Wolves. Yes. So that we could, you know, because in this trilogy you only meet Ice Wolves and Scorched Dragons. True. Apart from you get to see one type of elemental at the very end who comes to visit, like on the last couple of pages. But I set up, you know, there are stone bears and there are thunder lions, and I created these elementals in other countries so that either I could come back and write about them one day, or maybe someone else could come back and write about them one day. So
really good idea. And I'm really excited about the thunder lions. I think that would be a great idea.
Yeah, I think so too.
So what books did you actually used to read when you were my age? That I'm really curious about.
Let me think. So many. One of my favorite series, it's quite old-fashioned. It was a series called Swallows and Amazons. And it was about a group of kids in our world who, when they went on holiday to the lake, they would pretend to be pirates and explorers and all kinds of things. And they never went to a magical world. They just used their imaginations to turn our world into another world. And
really do.
yeah, And
Yeah.
and I spent a lot of time doing that as a kid. I would, when they were explorers in the books, I would be an explorer in my neighborhood, and I would ride around on my bike and make a map and name everything after, the adventures that we had. And I would copy a lot of the things out of the books. I was always obsessed with stories that sort of felt like they could really happen to me.
That sounds really, really nice.
Yeah.
Now, you spoke a bit earlier, before we entered live, about an editor you really liked. And she asked you to create a book for her, right? Or more, I believe.
Yeah. So my very first book, These Broken Stars, I worked with this editor, and I really liked getting notes from her, which is funny because usually when you write a story and someone gives you notes, the first thing you think is, how dare you? Everything you said is wrong. My story's perfect. And then, of course, you realize it's not perfect at all and you need help. But yeah, we always stayed in touch. And a few years later, when the publisher she was working at was looking for another fantasy series, she thought of me. And so she got in touch and said, would you like to come and write a fantasy series for me? And she barely even finished the sentence before I was like, yes, I would. I know what it's about. So we had a fantastic time daydreaming and planning and deciding, what it would be based on. And I said I thought the world would be a little like Iceland. And she said, oh, maybe you'll have to go to Iceland. So I went to Iceland. It was pretty good fun.
But now when you created the elementals, were the ice wolves and the scorched dragons the first elementals you thought of? Or you had a different idea in mind that at a minute just crashed and you have to go with something else?
I think they were there pretty early on. Like I thought about, wind and water and earth, but I wanted two elements that were a really obvious clash straight away, fire and ice, like they both destroy each other. And I liked the idea of having these elements that destroy each other that actually have to work together. And wolves and dragons weren't that obvious, but I just love them. And writing about what you love is usually a good idea.
Actually, that's a pretty true thing. Water and ice cannot be without each other, or fire and ice, for example, cannot be without each other, as sun and the moon, or night and day. That's pretty much why they work together. They have to, pretty much. The best thing is they work better together than divided. Yeah,
absolutely. And you've got the obvious of the fire and ice, but you've also got the ice wolves who are very loyal and very organized and very they work as a family and they work as a pack. And then you've got the scorched dragons who are very artistic and creative and very individual, and no one wants to follow the rules. And again, they don't sound like they should work together, but when they do work together, they're stronger because of it. So
now, my question is, which one do you like the most? Were the scorched dragons the ones you preferred? Like, if you were to be an elemental, what do you think you would be?
Do you know, I get asked this a lot, and I don't think I've ever really been able to decide. I think it changes day to day because I'm very loyal. I'll do anything for my family and my friends, which is a very ice wolf way to be. And, sometimes I quite like rules because I like to know that I'm doing the right thing. But I think in the end, I would be a scorched dragon because they're so artistic, and, a scorched dragon can just, forget everything around them and get lost in whatever creative thing they're doing. And that's what I do all the time. So I think that's
the same thing with the wolves. I like the fact that they work for their pack, for their family, and I want to do that as well. But yet the freedom of the scorched dragons, the intelligence and the imagination that they have, and that free heart, no rules to follow, that's what I most of the time want to do.
Yeah, but there's there's those upsides to both of them, but you can also say that, you know, the Scotch dragons are selfish, and you can also say that the ice wolves, you know, follow the rules even when the rules hurt people. So that's why they need each other, because they need to learn. They need to learn from each other.
Yeah, it's a tricky question.
Yeah, it sure is.
Oh, do you, now a bit more serious, do you think that this chapter, this bad moment we're all passing at the moment, I'm talking about the pandemic, would have been harder without Anders and Reina?
I mean, I don't know how I would have done it without books. I can't imagine, because, you know, when you pick up a book, you go somewhere else. And I don't just mean you get to see other places, although I love traveling and I miss traveling, but you get to be someone else for a while. You get to have different problems and you know, different places to explore. And I think for me, getting to write stories also helps with that. But and I hope my stories have helped readers escape for a little while.
Really helped me.
I think I've escaped writing my own stories, and I've also escaped reading other people's stories.
Usually when I write, as I talked before, I try to see the story. I just come with a very, very basic story, like a kid in a school. And then I keep thinking about it. I add to that kid a brother, and then some parents, and a pet, and a story. And then I just start seeing it, and it feels wonderful. Yeah,
I do that before I go to sleep at night. When I lie down, I think about the part of the story that I'm going to write the next day, and I just build it in my head like a little movie and imagine all of it. And I try to really feel what the characters will feel, and, you know, think about what they would do. And then when I wake up in the morning, you know, hopefully I remember everything. It's usually there when I wake up in the morning.
If we take out a bit of the elementals, the next book you would write, would it be for adults?
So I'm writing a few books at the moment. I'm writing one for teens.
Yes.
I'm thinking about writing one for adults, which I've never done before, but I have an idea that I think might just work better as for adults. So you and your audience are the first people in the world who have just heard that. But yeah, I'm thinking about maybe writing one for adults, but, you know, I think I'll always write for the audience for Ice Wolves, because I don't know, I love writing. I love writing for readers that age. I think they really love to escape into books, and so do I.
So do I. But now, when you write and you take a break and you raise up your eyes, what do you see?
At the moment, so for the last 2 years, I saw the same thing every single time I looked up, which was I have a little office at the end of our garden, and so I could see this big, beautiful tree that all these birds live in. And it's like watching a soap opera, because I've been watching them for 2 years. I know, oh, that one doesn't like that one, and that one's always hungry, and what they all do. But we were in lockdown for a long time here in Australia. Now I can go out. I sometimes go down to the beach instead and write, just to see somewhere different. So just in my car, and just when I stop, I can just look up and see the horizon, which is really nice.
Yeah, that sounds really, really nice, and I just really like it. And actually, I expected this interview to be, I expect myself to be much more nervous and to be much harder to find more words, but I don't know, I feel so natural talking to you, and it feels great. I think this is going to be once in a lifetime experience, and actually my first interview.
Well, I mean, it's because you're a writer. And I think when two writers are talking to each other, it's always easy. It's because you're the same kind of person.
Pretty much.
Even if you're different ages and in different countries, you always have something that's in common, I think.
Yeah. What really is sometimes a problem is motivation. I usually start with a really, really big idea from the very beginning, and I just cannot carry it to the end.
Yeah, it's really hard. It's really hard. I always say that if you write a story and you finish the story is already better than 99% of stories that have ever been written, because 99% of stories that were ever written don't have an ending. So it's hard to do. I think I play lots of tricks on myself sometimes. I promise myself rewards, or I give a piece of my story to one of my friends because then I know they'll yell at me until I give them more of my story. Sometimes I jump ahead to a bit that I'm really excited about. And, sometimes you just have to take some time off. If you've been doing too much, sometimes you need a break.
Usually I start with these stories at school, and my biggest problem is I start doing it on my little notebook, and then the lesson finishes and I never manage to finish it.
Everything I own, I write on. I have so many notebooks and they've all got little bits of stories or little bits of ideas. And my husband, he just laughs at me. He's like, why don't you put them all in the same place? But I never do. They're all over the house. So I'm always like, I think it was a blue notebook. And I'm just taking apart the whole house, trying to find this one place I wrote down an idea. But when I was at school, I used to write stories on the back of my notes all the time. Oh yeah. Once I failed a chemistry test because I wrote a story on the back of the test of my notes. And then when I was studying, I forgot that there were chemistry notes on the other side. So I only studied like half the term, but I hadn't been paying a lot of attention. So I didn't realize that I wasn't studying the whole thing. And I ended up sitting there in the test being like, well, this is outrageous. I don't think we were ever taught any of this. And then eventually I realized, oh no, it's on the back of my story. I didn't study.
That happened to me as well at math. I have like a special character named Darius, who's a boy with a few problems, and his brother Peter is a teenager. Actually, they're both teenagers, but Peter's the older one. And I always think about them at the math class, and I never managed to finish the test. Never, ever.
Well, hopefully your teachers aren't watching and they won't find out.
Thankfully not. We're not in the same class at that minute.
There you go. You'll be fine.
For now.
For now, yeah.
I have to get rid of them for now. Now, actually, these were kind of all my questions, but I feel like I just want to keep going and I have nothing in mind.
Are we allowed to keep going, or do we have to wrap up?
I don't know.
Well, I don't know either, so I guess we could just keep going and see what happens.
Why not? Okay, we have 30 minutes.
Oh, there you go. We are allowed to keep going.
Yes. So I think this will be my last question then. Will you keep going? If something bad happens, or thank God, maybe it doesn't, but if your motivation would go really, really down, do you think that Elizabeth, Anders, and Raina would come back for you?
Yeah.
Your pack?
Yeah, absolutely. I've had some, everyone has terrible things happen in their lives, and I've had some pretty terrible things happen in mine, and I've had lots of wonderful things as well. But the thing that is always there, I think, in the really terrible moments is characters from books. And I think that's true whether you're a reader or whether you're a writer. I think for me, when I've been having hard times, sometimes other people's books have helped me through, and sometimes I know people have read my books at tough times. And sometimes when I'm having a really hard time, writing is how I go through it. And sometimes you have to be very, very honest on the page, and that's really scary. You're sharing something that you wouldn't normally tell people. So when I write Anders and he thinks, I'm scared, I don't know what to say, I wish someone else would come and be in charge, you know, sometimes that's a thought that I've had. And I think what's important is that when I write that down and other people read it, they think, oh, I'm not the only one to feel that way. And, you know, books keep us company because they give us characters to hang out with. But I think books also keep us company because they give us other readers to hang out with. And, you know, when we see something on the page and we know it's true of us as well, then we know we're not on our own. So sometimes you have to be very brave when you're writing, and you have to write the parts of yourself that you wouldn't always tell people about, or that you would pretend didn't exist. But I think those are the most important things to write. So, you know, I think my characters would always take care of me when I was in trouble, because my characters are me. You know, Elizabeth is my loyalty, and, you know, Anders is my determination, and, you know, Raina is my bravery, and they all, you know, they're all parts of me.
Yeah,
you know,
really true.
Zacharias is the bit that likes dessert, but, you know, they're all parts of me. So I think, you know, yeah, they're always there for me in hard times, because they're parts of who I am, and parts that when you share them, they don't feel as scary anymore.
Really good friend of mine from school told me yesterday that if I'm nervous or a bit scared, I should think about my favorite Disney character, which is Merida, and think she's brave, so I have to be brave as her.
Yeah, right. But it means more seeing that she's brave, because, you know, she doesn't always feel brave.
Indeed.
And, you know, if it looked like it wasn't hard, then you'd think, well, okay, fine, it's not hard for you, but it's terrible for me. I think it's when you see someone who's scared or embarrassed or doesn't know what to do, or, you know, whatever it is in a book. Yeah, that's how you know that other people feel the same way you do, and that actually everyone in your class feels the same way you do, and your parents feel the same way you do, and your teachers do too. They're just sometimes better at not showing it.
And another question. If you were a character in a children's book, what
character would I be?
Yeah.
Do you guys have a book called The Very Hungry Caterpillar? It's a picture book for small children. It's very famous in the United States and Australia. And the picture book is just this little caterpillar, and it's like he eats 1 cake, 2 apples, 3 hamburgers. It's like a counting book. And I always say that's who I would be, because I would just snack all day long. But I guess that's why I wrote Zacharias, actually. So if I was someone in one of my own books, that's who I would be. The guy in the corner who's like, are you going to eat that food? Because if not, I'll finish it for you.
That is really nice. And it was such a pleasure to meet you and talk to you and find out how you think about writing and about wolves and dragons and the elementals. Yeah. It was great.
It was such a pleasure to meet you. Good luck with all your writing.
Thank you very, very much. With you as well.
Yeah.